What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Roll Tide Cafe, a part of the Bama Standard Network. As you guys can see here, we got an all-star panel on today. I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves. Sishi, we're starting off with you.
Yes, my name is Payne. Some of you may recognize me here. I'm the host of Crimson Dynasty, one of the awesome shows on the Bama Standard Network, and I will toss it over to Dan.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dan James, lead recruiting analyst for the Bama Standard Network. I'm more than happy, to answer questions, help in a way I need. We're here to do a brief recruiting video on two prospects. So, Johnathan, we'll let you start us off.
Yeah, we got some big news dropping. Look, there's a ton of information dropping today, tomorrow, and all that good stuff, and I plan on making a video about this later on. But obviously, On3 acquiring Rivals and then Yahoo Sports releasing it really created this flood of information coming out right now. But with that being said, we're going to be concentrating on these two recruits that dropped our top 4 and then a top 5. And really, I want to get from the panel, what they bring to the table, what they bring to Alabama, and some of that basic information. So let's go ahead and jump into this real quick. We're going to be starting off with 4-star linebacker Nick Abrams II. I'm going to give some basic information, and Sishi will pass this off to you. We're talking about the number 14 linebacker, 227th nationally. Obviously, these rankings are going to change drastically leading up to final signing day in February. But this is what we're getting so far here. 6'2", 215 pounds out of Owings Mills, Maryland, McDonough High School. Right now, his Final Four that he did release was Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, and Oregon. Now, with that being said, Sishi, tell me about Nick Abrams and what he can bring to Alabama.
Yeah, he's one of those very versatile guys. I mean, he's someone that we actually talked about recently on the Crimson Dynasty. And what I see with him, he does remind me of that prototypical linebacker that you would see at Alabama. He's highly rated and ranked as a linebacker in the nation. At one point, he was one of the top 15 linebackers in the nation. Now, he was in Tuscaloosa for one of our spring practices. And, it sounded like he hit it off really well, with the guys and even with the coaches. One thing that I think stands out the most with him, at least from, just my understanding of his capabilities, is that he's one of those guys that I believe a Kane Womack type of system may work out very well for him. He can play multiple positions. This guy is known to actually be able to stop the run well, play in the backfield, rush the quarterback. I mean, he's someone, maybe you can put him at that wolf position, maybe you can put him in the backfield. I mean, he's a guy that you can kind of plug and play and kind of get whatever you're looking for out of him. So, Dan, I'll toss it to you because I know that we talked about him on the Crimson Dynasty, and I know that you have a lot of experience regarding just understanding the recruits and what they. And I like to talk to you about comparisons, and that was something I wanted to ask you. Who would you compare him to for Alabama fans, just to have as reference? And then what do you think when you think of Nick Abrams?
Okay, yeah, size coming out. I would compare him to Deontay Lawson. 6'2", 220 pounds. So he already has the size that you're looking for, the prototypical size. I like his ability to move, and go sideline to sideline. He can play in the box, he can cover. But one thing I found very, very interesting, which lets me know that Alabama is a serious contender for him, is the team that I thought was leading for him. He dropped from his Final Four. Yep. From the final schools, and that was Penn State. Mm-hmm. I thought he was a shoe-in to go to Penn State, and so that lets me know that Alabama has a legitimate shot. I think we'll be battling Michigan. Maryland is also Michigan territory as well. But I like where Bama sits. So anytime you get into the final 2 or 3, you're in home run distance. So. We get him on campus a couple more times. He got official visit set up, and so we just go from there. But we have the relationships in place with him, and I think we got on him early enough. And this is a guy that we would really like to have join us in Tuscaloosa.
No doubt here. So from the notes I got, which Sishi nailed it right off the bat, so I made that face. My note was Kane Womack pitching him the versatility. So far, it seemed to really sell him on Bama at the current moment here. Can play multiple positions on the defensive side, just like Sishi said as well. Some of his stats from the past season: 77 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, and 1 interception, which screams versatility. It reminds me a lot of Bill Belichick bringing in linebackers when he was at the Patriots. Like, look, you can't just do one thing, right? We need you to be able to move around, play at multiple positions, which is what Dante Hightower and those guys there did really well. So just to bring that up. So with that being said, moving on here, we're talking about 4-star wide receiver Kayden Dixon-Wyatt was also another one that dropped his top 5 today. The number 6 wide receiver, according to 24/7 Sports, number 59 player nationally, 6'3", 185 pounds, out of Santa Ana. We're talking about modern day here. Obviously, we're very familiar with that territory, right? Bryce Young and a host of others there. And he listed Alabama, Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, and USC as his finalists. Starting off with you, Dan.
Okay, this is another one, modern day, so we hope the Alabama pipeline can continue. He's a good sized wide receiver, was 6'1", 6'2". I don't have the official measurement for him, but he's been on campus at least once this spring. And so we're getting him in for another official visit. And it's somebody that I like in our offense. He's a guy a possession type receiver. He's not a burner, but he's a refined route runner. So that's one thing that stood out on me from watching this film. But he's somebody that is a more upside guy. So you just look at the offer list, you can tell what kind of player you get. You get anytime you get a wide receiver offer from Ohio State, that pretty much tells you what type of player you'll be getting. So. You look at the teams, you look at the offer list, and that tell you a lot about a player.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of times I look at these players, these recruits, from the perspective of, is this that prototypical Alabama player? And I say that because we always talk about the standard, right? And that, to me, that falls even in line with the recruits and the guys that we happen to pick up, even out of the portal. And so when you look at him, at least the last time I checked, he was 6'2", 180 pounds, solid guy. Of course, you mentioned modern day and just that pipeline. And we know that's one of those schools where they produce really top talent, and those guys that come from that particular school, modern day, they like to come to the Alabamas, they like to come to the Southeast. And so I think that is going to be an advantage. But I think a key thing as well, I know that at one point Texas and USC were kind of going after him pretty hard. He's on the West Coast, and I know maybe about a month ago, he had mentioned that Oregon was kind of in the lead for him at that time. However, if I remember correctly, we either just got Ryan Grubb or we didn't have him yet. And so I think that we're going to start to see this Ryan Grubb effect, if that makes sense. I think that was a huge component that we missed, just having that solid offensive coordinator. And so I think a guy like Dixon-Wyatt coming from California, with Ryan Grubb coming from the West Coast, Coach DeBoer coming from the West Coast, you have Austin Mack that came from the West Coast, so Courtney Morgan. So when you really start to think about all the pieces, if he's sitting there and if he's really considering, okay, where am I going to go? Where am I going to feel comfortable, but also feel like I'm being set up for success? I could very well see him picking Alabama. We have Derek Meadows, Latsier Brooks. You have guys that he's going to come in after, be able to learn from, but he's going to know that he's going to get out there and he's going to play pretty soon.
Yeah, definitely an all-star wide receiver, in my opinion. As far as my notes go here, we're talking about dominates 50-50 balls by strong hands and aggression on the body positioning, right? So another thing that's kind of undervalued, but they definitely hit on, according to 24/7, is he is an outstanding blocker for a wide receiver, willing to get his hands dirty, right? So you always want to hear that. Reminds me a bit of, obviously, Kendrick Law here. Physical style receiver, like you said, a position receiver, loves and can catch through the contact here. And in my opinion, when you talk about these traits, I think of a red zone nightmare. He's up to actually 6'3". They released his measurements 2 days ago. So 6'3", and he's up to 185 pounds. And then also earned Alpha Dog honors at Vegas All 22. Dan, we're talking about 2 videos in a row. It seems like every prospect we've been mentioning earned what? The Alpha Dog honors, man, and every single one of them. So, but with that being said, yeah, that's all we got for these 2 recruits. Any last words on them, Sishi?
I mean, I'm just excited. I think that this year in and of itself, you thought we had a pretty good year last year with Coach DeBoer, that being his first year. Wait until you see what we have this year. I think the guys have bought in the fact that we didn't have anyone hitting the portal. Like Coach DeBoer told the guys, the grass is not always greener. We have guys who are buying into the system, buying into the standard, because the standard is still there and they want to win. And I think we're going to go all the way and we're going to see that trickle down to the recruits. So roll tide from my end.
What you got, Dan?
Yes, one note I want to make on him, he tentatively has a visit set up for May the 16th. He's the only visitor that weekend of May the 16th. So I expect, that visit to get that date to get moved around. So they're probably going to push it back. We'll see. But because of him being the only recruit, that'll be a good thing. But we're trying to move the visit back. Among his favorites, to get the last visit. So that's something I thought that was pretty interesting. Him being the only official visitor that's listed as visiting the weekend of May 16th through the 18th. But like you said, a guy that can block. I didn't mention that before, but that's something that's going to be big in Ryan Grubb's offense. But another thing that I find interesting, Alabama, of course, doesn't have a quarterback in the class. And usually wide receivers want to know, the quarterbacks tend to bring the wide receivers into the class, and for Alabama to be on his short list without having a quarterback committed at the time is pretty interesting in itself.
No doubt here. And one last thing for me, talking about Nick Abrams here and the connection of Michigan can typically go into Maryland, right? So, and all that good stuff. Well, Courtney Morgan, I do believe, was in contact with Nick Abrams way back when he was at Michigan. So hopefully maybe that can bring a little razzle-dazzle to him as well and bring him over. So with that being said, that's all we got here for today. And I guess we can let everybody know where we can find us all, starting off with you, Sishi.
Yes, you can find me here every Wednesday night on the Bama Standard Network hosting Crimson Dynasty, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Dan is actually one of my awesome co-hosts, so you can catch him there as well with me. And then you can find me on X at official Sishi or on Instagram at beauty_of_intelligence.
Dan.
Yes, you can find me every Tuesday night on the Final Whistle right here on this network, and also on the Final Whistle Network, move to our own network, and also every Wednesday, the Crimson Dynasty, like you said, with Sishi and JB, every Wednesday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Central, and you can find me on X at the Final Whistle Dan, on Instagram, Dan James 4.
There you go. And as far as me, college football chatter every Friday, 7:30 p.m. Central Time at Bama Nation, John. Other than that, everybody have a good day. And as always,
Roll down Tide.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.